I've been thinking a lot lately about how just wonderful it is to like have a conversation with people. Even the most banal topics of conversation make time pass more quickly. How I used to work at the lab, we would just pass 8 hours just by talking. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like YouTube scratches that itch in the same part of my brain where when I watch a YouTube video, this is like the parasocial relationship part of it, where it's like I feel like I'm having a conversation with that person. And I just love videos where it's just someone sitting down and talking to the screen for a little bit. So anyways, that's all to say that this is gonna be a sit down talking style video where I discuss a couple of the books I've been reading in the past month or so and update you guys on what I'm currently reading, which is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, this chunky boy. I'm about this much through, so which doesn't seem like a lot, but I've actually been, that's like a good chunk actually. It's just that this book is so freaking long that it doesn't look that like I've been reading that much, but it's a very like tongue-in-cheek book and it's got a lot of like dry British humor. It feels like a very self-aware book, and I mean that Susanna Clarke is aware of British culture in context historically and colonially. It's not dealing with all of that directly head on, but it's starting to. I really like the direction that this book is taking. Yeah, I find British society fascinating and like just British history fascinating, and specifically the way that upper class British people would create these just absurd rules and like ways of speaking, and just the strange sort of social rules that the upper class would create to differentiate themselves from the lower classes. Just, I love those intricacies, and I feel like this book is really dealing with like a lot of the social absurdities of British society and like British history. So yeah, I'm really liking that. And obviously there's like the whole magic aspect that's being thrown in. In a lot of ways, this book feels like the perfect mix of things that I love, which is, you know, classical novels in the style of like Austen or Bronte, but with fantasy elements. And I hope I don't sound absolutely ridiculous saying that, because I know I'm like not the most like literary person, so I feel like, I don't know if that just sounds like completely off base, but yeah, I'm really liking it so far. That's what I'm currently reading. I also wanted to talk about a few of the books that I already read. The first book is The Psalm for the Wild-Built by Becky Chambers. This book and Becky Chambers in general have just been like super popping off on the fantasy scene, and they've been on my radar for a while now, and I finally got to read it. I read the audiobook via Hoopla. Hoopla is like my favorite app along with Libby, just because they give me access to so many library books, and like I barely ever have to buy books, and I've basically been able to like cancel my Audible subscription because I just only read audiobooks via Libby or Hoopla. So hell yeah for public libraries. But anyways, Psalm for the Wild-Built, I totally understand why Becky Chambers is hyped now. I loved the world building in this novella, like just the idea of a world where things are radically different, and like the hope that it gave me to like imagine a world where humans can work and not in a capitalistic sense, like just work because they want to, and like that's, you know, according to the community's needs. There's this idea of like without capitalism no one would have to work, and like I just don't think that's true. Like we would still need people to do like farming and like do the things that basically we do, but it would just be in a more laid back, like slow sense. Like I'm not making any sense right now, but like it just was interesting to imagine a world different from ours. It was very optimistic. It just felt like I was laying down this like super heavy load while I was reading this book. Yeah, I think that is probably the best and most strongest aspect of this novella, is just the radical idea that things can be different. I will say, from a storycraft perspective, the plot itself felt a little disjointed, and I personally enjoyed the first half of the book a lot more than the latter half. Part of what this novella deals with is, you know, the difference between humans and robots, and what a robot would be like if it were to become sentient. And that sounds a little familiar to the concept behind Murderbot, and honestly, I just found myself thinking that a lot of the things about the robot and like the differences between the human and the robot, like that's explored a lot in this novella, and I felt like that is explored much better, more subtly, and just to greater effect in the Murderbot series. Because of that, this novella sort of fell flat for me in the latter half, but the world building is just incredibly creative, and like I said, just a really beautiful and novel concept that we can actually like enjoy working and not be like worked to the bone. I felt especially relevant to my life now that I've entered the workforce as a full-time worker. I've been thinking a lot about just capitalism and my role in that, and like how now that I've graduated school, I'm basically never gonna have like 3 months off, you know, unless I'm like unemployed or, you know, like I have like that amount of PTO saved up. Like it's just like never gonna be a like constant thing that like every year you get 3 months off to like do whatever you want. It's a scary way to live. I ended up giving Psalm for the Wild Build 3 stars just because I felt like from a craft story perspective, like I felt like it could have been stronger, but very, very strong concept, and I'm definitely gonna read other books by Becky Chambers and other books in this series. Okay, the next thing that I wanted to discuss in this video is the Raven cycle. Like I said in my last video, I reread the books recently with my boyfriend Nat, and it was very interesting to come to the series again as an adult. And I want to take sort of a more critical tone in this video because I know in the last video I just sort of talked about it, and when I had filmed that video I had only read up to The Dream Thieves, but now I've reread all 4 books, and it's very interesting to see the drop in quality between the second book and the third book, sorry. It feels very strange because the second book, The Dream Thieves, is fantastic, incredible, probably the high point in the series. And then the third book is a lot shorter, and I feel like it just completely takes out the wind in the series. First of all, the pacing in the third book is a lot faster, and it feels strange because the characters are still going through a lot of stuff and there's still like all these events happening, and whereas the second and first book were a lot slower and you would sort of see the characters in their day-to-day lives, in the third book it speeds up a lot, and it just felt like you lack that feeling of like really living these characters' lives with them, and it was kind of jarring to go from that pace. And I wonder why that is. I wonder if it's because, you know, the publisher noticed that the first 2 books got super popular, and if they wanted to sort of capitalize on that popularity by putting the books out as soon as possible. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. But yeah, it's really disappointing how the third and fourth books are just not quite up to par with the first half of the series. And that's not to say that they're terrible. I think that the character work in those 2 books is still fantastic and beautiful and honestly masterful for the YA genre. I think that this series is still absolutely my favorite YA series of all time, and I think that Steve Otter is an absolutely incredible writer, prose-wise, character-wise. I think she is unparalleled in the YA genre. But yeah, I think the plot just sort of sputters out in the last book, and you're just like, well, what was the point of all that? A little bit. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video. Take care.